Tim, as before we really get into the financial report number 2, I would like for you to actually formally introduce our new finance director to members of council and the citizens. So, Tim, you get to do that first.
Thank you, Greg. Yes, our new finance director is Gene Chris, sitting over here. That's Gene's entrance. Gene comes from us from Pennsylvania. She's worked in a number of different communities and financial background, financial management, very strong in writing policies and procedures. And I thought that was a wonderful thing as we were doing our interviews. Gene, would you mind getting up and a little bit of a background on some things you've done?
Sure, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to come to the city of Steubenville. It reminds me of home very much. I grew up in Beaver Falls, Pennsylvania, which is very similar so far of what I've seen of Steubenville. We had a college there, which was Geneva College, where I graduated with degrees in accounting and economics. And I have 17 years experience working in government. Started at the county level as a fiscal budget specialist, and then went on to manage 3 different municipalities of different sizes. So have done both sides, the financing and the management, which I think makes me very happy to be able to support a manager and do the type of work I like the best, which is understanding the finances of the community and what we have and what you need to get done. So please, if you have any other questions, feel free to ask me, and thank you very much. It's an honor to be part of your community.
Great, thank you.
Welcome, Gene. Thank you, Tim. Next thing on item is what was sent via email to all the council or paper copy on is our financial report, income tax is the first thing on the agenda. We've been very blessed in the near term. We're not sure how it will continue through the year, but our income taxes have been up. And Tim, Gene, if you want to comment on that, and any ideas as to why we're seeing a real positive in our income tax receipt the first 2 months this year.
Sure, I'd be happy to, Greg. The income tax report, again, looking at our income tax receipts, they have increased significantly over this same point in time in 2014 and 2013. At those during those years, the year-to-date collections in 2013 were $1,002,994.88. So just slightly over $1 million. In 2014, at the same point in time, it was $1,691,518. This year, they are at a little over 1.2 million. So again, it is significant, and that's a good thing. The collections are up about 29.6% over last year, approximately $217,000. We did, we want to make certain whenever we look at our financial reports, good news or bad news, we need to look at trends. Is this something that we think is going to be a trend going forward? We did ask the Regional Income Tax Authority their thoughts. They speculated a little bit and was able to give a little bit more certainty in other areas. Factors that may attribute to this increase could include tax collection activities from January. Perhaps those won't recorded until February. It would still be a net plus for us, but that might be why January and February of this year were not more even or comparable. Also, quarterly withholding payments from 2014 may not have been received until February. It's possible that December withholdings may tend to be higher, if businesses are giving bonuses or other factors at the end of the year. In addition, Rita did cite payments potentially from new companies. One in particular, estimated net profit taxes that were received in our system for the very first time. And that's obviously very good news because that's economic development. My thoughts on it are, on the whole, it's a positive trend. We need to continue to monitor it. I think some portion of it, it would be reasonable to attribute to the improvement in the economy overall. However, I think we need to as I said, watch it, determine if these collection levels are indeed sustainable. And so we'll want to look at the March reports very closely. Gene, I don't know if you have any additional thoughts on income tax receipts.
No, I concur. It's an exciting figure, but it's really too early to predict that trend will continue. But that's one of the things that administration and finance will do is watch all of these figures, look for trends, and hopefully this will continue a little bit later in the year. We should be able to have some more certainty.
Yeah, and as you kind of mentioned throughout the report, I think that we really want to look at the first quarter and really into the second quarter to see what kinds of trends that are developing. I would caution against any major change in what we're doing until we were able to evaluate the next couple of quarters. So we're happy to answer any questions.
Questions?
I just hope you keep a close eye on the water department and the delinquents. Don't want to see them get out of hand like they did in the past. We have our report from the auditor. Let's follow the blueprint. Thank you.
It's coming up. Very good. Any other comments on the income tax? Next is overtime, and I'm sure everybody could guess that streets are at the head of the ballgame here on overtime, which has become a necessary evil for weather that we've had in February. Hopefully, now we're breaking into spring, and that should hopefully fall into line. Tim, anything other than that you see it as a negative within our overtime report, other than just streets?
Well, streets, water, and police. I think those are the areas that bear most attention. Streets, obviously, a very harsh winter, but then again, we're right now at 123% of overtime. And so I think that certainly that was, our estimate of overtime was not all that accurate for 2015. So I think that certainly needs reevaluating. Police, I think that's more understandable. We've been devoting more resources to the hilltop neighborhoods and are going to continue to do that. So I think that doesn't surprise me. And water is, quite frankly, water breaks. And we need to continue our water line replacement program. There's a couple of items on tonight's agenda that, again, fall in line with us repairing water lines, reducing water loss, and not having those main breaks, which always seem to happen at night. They never happen during normal business hours. So I think overall our overtime is running at about a little over 29% of the budget. We should be more towards between 16 and 17%. Obviously, with winter being over, it really is over. We should see a decline in that. But we need to watch it. We need to, we need to pull back on and try to cut overtime as much as we can going throughout the year.
One thing I'd like to say too, you mentioned about the police, and I'm going to tag Willie as chairman of safety in on this. You mentioned about the police being on the hilltops, and we have seen success with us and you, administration, making that change to add more officers on hilltops. And am I correct in saying we really haven't seen any incidents on the hilltop since September of last year?
Uh,
Without the police chief being in here to answer that question.
Yeah, as I recall, in September of last year, we implemented the Hilltop Neighborhoods strategic plan. Since that time, we have not seen those types of shooting incidents in the Hilltop areas. I think quite honestly, though, those have kind of shifted a little bit, and we're starting to see those types of incidents, shots fired around the fringes of the central business district. So I think there's a geographic component to it. We don't have, it would be difficult now to switch resources to the central business district. I think we would just be kind of flipping back and forth. Best thing we can do is, as we point out a little later in the presentation, we need to go for the cops grant this year and get 2 additional officers. The only solution I feel to our issues there is we are understaffed in the police department. In my opinion, 2 more officers would make a significant difference, in my opinion.
Okay, we'll get into that very shortly, but I wanted to point that out, and Angie did thank me for having everybody sent downtown facetiously. But we know officers are working very hard and diligently with their efforts. Any other questions or comments on the overtime report from council? Okay. John, you brought up about water, sewer, and sanitation collections report. We've seen a little tick up in the water. Tim and Jean, if you want to address that, it might be obviously due to the meters coming in.
Yeah, I think the collections, really, I think it's for the first time since I've been here, collections in water are actually running ahead of projections. Not a great deal, but they certainly are higher. I think that's can be attributed to, we did finish the phase 1 meters last year. I'd have to think that would have some impact on what we're seeing. Delinquencies are down, so I think that obviously is going to help our collections. And what we want to see is those 2 areas. We don't want to do anything with rates. We want to have see what the meters do, work on the collections, and and keep that water reserve fund where it is. So that's where we are with the water fund in terms of collections. Sanitation is running about flat. It's right where the projected collections to be. Sewer, though, is lagging significantly behind. And again, I'm not certain on that one why that would be. Where we need to look a little more closely at that and determine just what might be going on there. I don't know, Gene, any thoughts on any of those? That one kind of, I think we don't really have a reason for that at this point.
No, and I think that, it's a reasonable assumption at this point that the meters will increase the revenue. But I want to make sure that we know it's a safe assumption. We currently test right now the phase 1, the commercial meters, to do a comparison. As soon as more residential meters come online, then we'll be able to look at a comparison there. And hopefully within a few months, we'll be able to tell you with much more certainty that prediction or that assumption that those meter changes will increase revenue is valid in the number. And that should give you some more confidence to act on that.
All right.
Any questions?
Questions, comments, committee, council?
If I can ask a question and back up to the water, especially the forecast for water infrastructure improvement projects, noting that on that particular sheet, a lot of the projects, such as Steubenville, Aberdeen, they're all projected to be funded, which is great news. However, I notice on here that the Lover's Lane and Fort Stephen Drive upgrades and water improvements are not funded. Is there a reason for that? I can understand the marina water line, because that's still,
And I'm sorry, Your Honor, which ones were those? I wasn't at the infrastructure report yet.
oh, we did.
Which,
We're talking about water, this report here.
yeah, and which project was that?
The Lovers Lane, Fort Steuben Drive, improvement phase 1 to water shear is not included. And also on Lovers Lane and Sunset phase 2, the water shear.
I'll have to look, Mayor, at our CIP and to see where those are. But those, you're right, those have not been assigned to cost yet.
And I would be thinking that we would take it maybe out of 216, but they're not funded in 2016 either. So if you could check and let me know.
I'd be happy to.
Thank you.
Other comments on that, and then you'll get back to us on that.
Right, and that,
That's just push back on the CIP.
right.
Could be. More important thing is going back, and you mentioned about 2 additional police officers. And one of the things I mentioned really in the safety community is we bring up the COPS grant, the impact on the safety fund, and we have 2 reports on that. I'd like to bring that up now for discussion. The impact is great on that particular fund, so I think we need to kind of go over it in great detail. The orange sheets the council should have. The forecast for the...
Where's it at, Greg?
The orange sheets within the whole packet that was emailed to everybody from the administration. Let's do one with and one without. You turned yours in one color. Oh, not Does everybody see them now?
No.
Yeah.
No.
Okay, I'll wait till... Willie, you got yours in front of you?
Where's it at in that packet? Toward the end or in the middle?
It's probably towards the beginning, right past the general fund. It's actually on the page attached to the general fund on the back. Go. Got it?
There's 2 sheets.
2 sheets. First sheet is a forecast. It shows the safety fund without transfers. For the COPS grant, in essence, not matching the COPS grant. It shows where we're at to the end of this year and just bringing it out to 2019, because with the COPS grant, we would have to match, I believe, $30,000 a year for the first 3 years, and then pay, which will be an amount of about $120,000 for the 4th year, which will be in 2019. So we can see that current projected at the end of 2019, without the COPS grant, that safety fund will, without any increases in revenue to it from, state workers' comp fund, it would end at $237,522, and that's on that first sheet. But with the thought and discussions of, can we use the safety fund to bring in, match the COPS grant, have 2 officers, and really dedicate them to eradicating, crime in this town? We could see that at the end of 2019, because we paid $120,000 in that year, that cash balance would be down to about $27,000 in that fund. So it does basically wipe that out for the most part, but at what cost? If we see significant improvement in crime statistics and actually, eradicating the crime, then, it's money well worth spent with the safety of our citizens. So, Tim?
Yeah, just a couple of observations. With the forecast that shows the impact on the safety fund of funding the COPS grant over the 4 years, I think what the value of this forecast is it shows that it can be done. I mean, it can be, if we get no additional revenue out of that or into that fund, it can fund that program. However, obviously, we wouldn't have a safety fund at the end. I think that's the important point to know that after 2019, it basically goes to a zero balance. There's no negative because we would cease to be a fund that we would be able to use. As we know, this is an unrestricted fund. We've been able to use it for safety-related projects for the city. I think a couple of thoughts are that we certainly, I feel, need the additional officers. We certainly can look to a safety wage tax or something of that nature to offset this, or somehow work in tandem with the safety fund. But it is I think it does show we can do it, but our safety fund will be at zero after 2019.
That was a forecast that we really had asked for in the safety meeting, and it gives us some information to chew on, basically.
Yeah. How realistic is it that we won't have any revenues? Well, we have had them in the past, but they've been at a declining amount, if I recall correctly. So I think it's probably a good conservative view, and again, this is where we would be at some point in time. Now, our intention, or at least I would recommend that if we're going to do the COPS grant, we don't go into it as we're going to do it for 4 years and then reduce our workforce. I think that would be the wrong way to approach it. We want to continue to strengthen the police force and grow the force where we need to. So, at some point in time, we need to make certain that there is sustainable funding going out years with these positions. So, this gets us to 2019, barely.
Okay, now, just going back, the COPS grant needs to be turned in when?
That's due later in the spring. I'm anticipating, it has not been announced yet,
May?
but I think May or June is a good.
All right. So I think it's a subject that we need to each take a look at as council, and any questions, please feel free, members of the committee, really, or members of council. Willie, you're having a safety committee meeting in a couple weeks?
Next week.
Next week? 24th. So, can this be an agenda item additionally on maybe, or we can move it to April?
I think we've had it in the past.
I mean, we can, but I wanted to also bring up.
Last agenda item.
Well, but then we won't get to it, that's the only
Yeah.
problem. I would like to discuss this, I know, I feel, I know Bob and Ken would probably like to discuss it also,
Yeah.
us being the members of that. And I know next week I wanted to talk about the wind tunnel, maybe get it going, I mean, we don't have to dwell on it long, but get some ideas from everybody, because I asked you all to look and think of some things we can do. I mean, yeah, we can put it on the agenda.
If we don't get to it, we could go in and, do it.
Well, I'm gonna check this out too.
Yeah.
It's in my phone. I didn't check my email at work. I'll print this off and I will.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I wanted you to get the numbers this week.
Right. Thank you.
Because we talked about it, and just put it on the table for discussions. But knowing that at some point we have to really either give our staff the yes or no to this for the deadline on the COPS grant.
I mean, that'll be the, when council will have to, I would anticipate a resolution that would need to be passed in order to support it.
Great, and I believe it is at the end of May when the chief said it has to be ready.
Yeah.
I would really like to talk about it next week, because we need to talk about it more than once if we have to vote on it and get it.
Got it. But we're going to keep this at the forefront of our discussions, not only in safety, but in finance, joint safety finance meetings to get this thing discussed and decided upon. Okay, Tim?
Sounds good.
Gene? Okay. Tim, you had some items you'd like to discuss under the general fund?
I do. Just a quick, go back with the water infrastructure improvement fund. Mayor, you asked a question that according to the CIP, we had $150,000 for phase one that was earmarked 2016, and Sunset Boulevard, Lovers Lane, phase two was going to be 2017 for $300,000. And in that report, I see that I do see the phase two, $300,000 for 2017. I think we need to look, and we may have an answer a little later. I know Chuck and Mike Dolak will be here for the regular session. Maybe during administrative report, we can answer what happened to phase one.
Okay. So going back on general fund, and there were some issues you wanted to discuss under our new health.
Yeah, general fund, it does, looking at our general fund forecast obviously is based on our surplus from 2014, projected 2015 revenues, less any projected 2015 expenditures. The report for this month includes a wage adjustment for fire and police that would be anticipated from collective bargaining agreements. The forecast also includes additional funds for health insurance premiums. As I mentioned in my report, we have been transitioning to our new health insurance. I've reviewed several issues regarding it, and my analysis is that I think we underestimated the cost of that health insurance for 2015. We were down at about 1.52 million going into November and December. I think we really should have been more at the 1.79 million figure. I think, and whether that's conservative or not, I think we need to plan for it accordingly. Funds are available to address this amount. However, we obviously need to reevaluate our coverage, any other budget cuts. Certainly with, as I mentioned, the general fund, and with any of the funds for that matter, we always have projected expenditures. We do not spend everything that we have. That would not be a prudent way to operate the city. So we definitely need to look at that. Jean and I have been working closely, and I've kind of tasked her to look. Well, the water fund is our most troubling fund because it does illustrate that it would go into a deficit position in 2016. The general fund is right next to the year after, 2017. So we need to make the changes now in order to avoid that in both those funds in those years. Two items that are on council's agenda this evening, ordinance 2015-21 and 2015-22 would fund or transfer funds from the general fund to the reserve fund. And I think council knows I've been an advocate of having a reserve fund. However, I would just request at this point that we table that legislation, not vote it down, but table it and reevaluate it after certainly looking at the second quarter to see where our revenues and expenditures come in. We know that income tax is up, but I would be more comfortable looking at other trends before we would take that action.
Tim, just, because I know we've set this up because we'd like to just kind of build up a reserve. The council does have the right, if as we get towards the third quarter, if we're looking at September's numbers in October, you say, hey, look, we probably should have done that transfer in March, so we need to pull out $200,000 as an example to help the general fund out to finish the rest of the year, we could do that.
And again, my thoughts are, I'm not saying don't do it, I'm saying let's table it and let's see. Right now, we've got numbers that are up and I just think we need to see some, what stabilization there is in those funds and certainly if those are sustainable. That's my only point. I think the time is not, it's not the right time to do that at this point.
Greg, with that, I agree that we should transfer that money. We can always take it back out. Because at home with the bank account, if you put your money in the savings account, you're least likely to take it out, but you might have to. But it's too easy to use it to fall back on that. I think we should go ahead with this plan with the rainy day fund. Shouldn't table the ordinance. We got a second reading on it. We've come this far. And we can always take it back out. But if it's in there, it might be less likely. And that's just my belief.
I agree with Bob. I agree with Bob. I think we set that up. We started the year with $2.3 million in the general fund, and we should move that just like we moved it last year. And if you're unlikely to move it, you're going to be unlikely to move it. It's not going to get moved. It's going to get spent. I'd just also like to comment on the budget projections for the general fund. The question was posed to me. How come your budget, general fund, is such a mess when in 2014 you had a slight surplus, in 2013 you had a slight surplus? Why all of a sudden are you in a mess for 2015? And based on my analysis, we're in a mess because we're spending too much. Because in 2014, now I agree the general fund and the safety fund is one and the same. In 2014, we spent like $12.1 million in those two funds. In 2015, we budgeted to spend $12.9 million. Now we're going to increase that by $271,000 for the health, and we're going to increase it by another $101,000 for raises. So we're budgeted to spend, and I know it's not, we don't spend everything we budget, right, but we are using the budget to project all these deficits and these dire warnings. So I think the whole budget needs to be examined. And we need to come up with a more realistic budget, because every year, I've been coming down here 2 years, one as a candidate and one as a councilman. I sat out there every month, there'd be warnings after warnings, general funds, horrible, horrible, horrible. Come the end, come December, lo and behold, we got a small surplus. And I don't think that's the right way to operate. We spent $12.1 million last year. We should spend slightly more than that this year, adjusting for inflation, which isn't that high. But that's what we should do, and if it is as dire as these reports show, we shouldn't be making the problem worse by giving out raises when, and then ultimately, so we got a problem, we tell everybody we have a problem, we're going to make the problem worse, and then later in the year, the city is probably going to go to the citizen and say, please help us get out of this problem. If I was a citizen, I'd say no. You knew there was a problem, you made it worse. So that's just something to think about. We should reopen the whole budget and examine it.
Yeah, I understand your points, Mike. I think, again, I'm not saying that 2015 is I think the word you used was a disaster. I didn't say that, and I don't think it is. But 2017 is, again, looking out a couple of years, is, I think, where the primary concern is in terms of these forecasts. I think last year we, and no apologies, I think that the council and the administration together did a great job to get those budget surpluses, and we didn't spend everything. And I'm not certain we, I think that's a good thing. And I think that our approach is similar to that we are not spending, we certainly didn't last year, we were under budget in our spending. I would anticipate we'll do everything again to do that in 2015.
To just play on this subject, we did in January introduce this legislation with the budget knowledge that that was gonna be put in the reserve fund. And, you know, I still, I mean, I get it, I understand Mike's point, but I do think that if we needed to pull the money back out, we can. You know, that's part of what the rules were, and I like to see us just put it in there, but knowing that with your comments tonight, and should the tax revenues not be what they are, and should expenses come in over time and/or anything else as a surprise, health insurance, that we would have to be, by the third quarter, and Gene, by the third quarter, really look at, do we need to pull back out? And maybe things improve and we don't, then we don't have to pull it out. Okay?
I'm kind of torn here, but I really think that, I don't see a problem with it myself. I think that holding it out is just giving the administration with the new finance director a month or a couple of weeks to look at where, you know, where the finances exactly are, why we missed the healthcare problem as far as the, you know, missing the budget by as much as we did. I would think that holding it out isn't that big a deal. We all agree that it has to go in there, but in there or in wherever, you know, we have to use it prudently, and I think just to give them the opportunity to see where the issues are, I have no problem with it.
Putting it in there, as question 10 would be, what would it do for the next at least 2 quarters, or a quarter, for
What was
spending?
I don't know, I'd have to look at the next, you know, again, that's why we do forecasts.
Yeah.
Obviously, the general fund will look worse, but I'm merely saying, I'm suggesting we take a time out on it, but that's just my suggestion.
Any other comments on this issue?
In other words, we have to pay another $250,000 for our health care insurance.
That is correct.
We have to eat that, and that's not, can't share with anybody. You know what I mean?
And I believe that's due to the wellness program.
I don't know.
No.
I'm just looking at the $4
Wasn't
million,
in the well.
I'm not too sharp.
Tim, it was due to an under budget forecast. The forecast for this year was under by $250,000 roughly.
That's a big, big number.
Yeah, it was brought to us.
You know, that being said, excuse me, under forecast, that being said, you know, healthcare issues are for everybody all across the country. And no matter what business or municipality that you're in, costs go up constantly in the healthcare business. So under forecasting that is understandable, but how do we correct it? That's the issue. It has to be corrected.
I
It's a
agree.
non-issue, it has to be corrected.
And that's what we're, I think, what the suggestion on the tabling was, just time to take a look at it and correct it.
Yeah, I agree, healthcare costs go all over the place. That's why we need to look at the whole budget. I mean, we've had a budget that was deficit spending, now we're going to increase deficit spending, we're going to have 1.2 million according to budget. We need to look, where shouldn't we spend? Because we have to spend for healthcare. Where shouldn't we spend? What program should get cut to get this budget more realistic to what ultimately is going to happen?
And I agree with that, Mike, and I believe the city manager has said that in the past.
I agree.
That we can take things out of the budget when we need be. We just have to come up with which one are the least important to council, and then we can make those adjustments. But that is something that we discussed.
But it's easier to do it earlier in the year than later.
Amen. I agree with you.
That's
Hindsight's beautiful. You're never wrong in hindsight. I mean,
us discussing it in the first quarter is better than the fourth quarter.
Right, because in the fourth quarter, you have to make a huge cut.
Yeah.
Any other comments on this?
It's just
My
ironic
inclination
that-
is I'd like to take it to vote, Your Honor.
Well, it's just ironic that we're talking about healthcare and the surplus that we were talking about earlier, the carryover, because we were self-insured. That's basically what gave us that surplus to carry it over to the following year. I think we could all admit to that. It was a roll of the dice. We couldn't, and anticipate that because you don't know about the claims until the end of the year for your forecast. But that's what gave us the surplus. And now we're talking about that's what's facing our debts. Just start going.
I'm going to vote because I'm in the opinion, I think we could take it out, Kenny, at any time. So I like to just put it in there, see how our team budgets, and if we need to, if we're hamstrung throughout the next quarter, then
There's only need two to come out of the committee.
that's it. All right. Thank you, Kenny. I do appreciate it. Tim, for sake of time, as I've been keeping an eye on, and I'm respectful of the mayor's 7:30 as best I can. I'd like to jump to number 5 and hold 3, 4, and 6 for a little bit of time. But on number 5, you sent us via email an issue dealing with, since we're talking about general public issue, you brought an issue dealing with personnel in the community development office. Why don't you state your case first? So go ahead and state your case before.
Well, no, I don't know if it's a case or not. It's a situation. We continually, in recent years, have received audit findings for some of the grant management activities in community development. One of the things we did a couple of years ago was, my understanding is to eliminate one position. That position was funded 80% by a grant. When we cut that staffing in half, and now we're having audit findings. That's purely the connection that I'm making. I did ask Finance and Chris Petrozzi to look at and put together a plan that would address that staffing in that department. Again, and as I mentioned earlier, I think it's probably an item that I would want to wait until a couple of quarters have gone by to see if we would fund. But again, we're going to seriously address some of our audit issues. Then we need to have the staff in place to properly manage these grants. Otherwise, we may see that finding again in future audit reports.
Okay. I think this is good to look at, and I just, want to state, creating a new position, I know with 80/20 potentially it's roughly about $10,000 hit to our general fund. We've talked about weaknesses in a general fund and spending money, and maybe this is something that we could table for a little while. We have till this year on number 1. On number 2, changing the title of a current clerical position. My understanding is there was a degree or designation that this person had received. This is the reason why this is being proposed. Okay. That hasn't, in my opinion, personally, that has not been done in the past. I don't recall that we gave, and Mayor Young, you guys have been here, Gary, that in the past that has been done before.
I thought that certification was in that office before with our former worker over there. Didn't Frankie have that certification when she was there?
Yes, and what we're asking for with regard to the certification, is the title change to add the term permit technician with regard to the increase that is being shown there. That is simply, again, to address audit findings only because, in addition to what Tim mentioned regarding the staffing, I believe that the issues are twofold. One is the staffing level, and another issue is related to turnover. Bringing that salary up to what other secretaries in the city are making in comparable positions. The salary right now, or in that position now, on the average, has had a turnover rate of a new employee every 4 years. Every 4 years, our employees tend to leave and go either to other city jobs or work outside employment. And so the actual addition of the title is to reflect that certification, and the increase is addressing, that is attempting to address that turnover issue by providing the compensation that other personnel in that position are getting.
Chris, and again, I respect you and the hard work your office does. I just don't think at this time we need to make a change on that, because we haven't done it in the past, so it'd be something new that we would do. I know it's only $1,500, but it's a precedent that I don't want to set at the moment. We have asked him to do a, what do you call it, analyzing where our salaries are and our benefits comparable to other comparable communities.
Wage and benefits.
And I think this is something that could be addressed within that report. So I would ask Tim, if you don't mind, and I would ask my community to comment, that this be part of that wage and benefit study.
That'd be fine. I've asked Jean, that's one of the list of things that I have asked her to take a look at. So I think that's very appropriate to do that.
I agree, if we haven't given
Background.
certificate raises in the past, why would we start now?
Right. Mike?
I agree. We shouldn't be giving spot raises, and I'm against giving raises to not only this, but other departments until we get the budget under control, and I'll be voting that way in the future.
Willie?
This is the position of issuing permits, building permits. Is this the position we're talking about?
Yeah, and within Chris's office, yes.
And that's one of the duties of the individual, yes.
Okay, is there possibility of moving that person out to the front, out there with the water department collection? Because a lot of times people need a permit and they're banging on the door trying to get in, and a lot of times and Bob and Kenny and I have talked about this, not together. But we have talked about this where there's a guy waiting outside for a permit, and sometimes he's held captive outside for 15, 20, maybe half hour, 45 minutes, because that person is at lunch or something like that. So I think maybe a move to a area where she may, this person not be centrally located in the billing office is what I'm getting at. That's all, just as you discuss this move, and if we want to add more money, I think that person should maybe come out. I don't know, that's up to you, but
There's some logistical difficulties regarding that, only because we rely on her so constantly that we would have to be constantly going to the front.
that's why I asked you to look at it in case, if that could happen, that's all. Just put that in with your, while you're searching this. That's all I wanted to ask.
That's my,
Yep.
the biggest complaint that I hear about is from a lot of contractors, is the wait, the phone calls, they call down there, they can't get through. I got contacted by a very reputable contractor who's been in business probably longer than I am old, and they're so backed up in there, he had to get a permit for a roof, and it's going to take him 3 weeks. Well, he can't wait 3 weeks because this roof collapsed and there's water coming in, so he can't wait for the permit. So, and the building department didn't give him a bad time. They just said, they went out there and they said, you don't have a permit. He said, I vowed for it. Go ahead, you don't have to stop your work due to the situation. But that's the biggest complaint that I hear. But I'm not for the raise part. We're spending money like drunken sailors in Zamboanga, and we don't have it. And I don't believe in new employees getting raises like this and old employees staying here for $14.81. I mean, if you're going to start a new employee, you start them out at $14.81, then you let them go up to $15.75 or whatever. But this is out of control with bringing new people in and giving them raises above people that have been here for 25, 30 years. And I know they're overworked in there.
But the other issue is that that's not going to change that it's still one person. There's not going to be two people. It's just a title change, and that makes a difference as well.
Like I said, I think this, Tim and Jean know that this is going to go under this wage and benefit,
Right.
this assessment, come back to council in a workshop session and decide what we'll go from there. this point, Tim, the other three issues, we'll table to the next finance committee meeting. If you don't mind, we'll talk about one, we'll do that. And Mayor, I'd like to now make a motion that we adjourn the finance committee meeting.
Second.
That's planned.